Right, hi everyone. Today we're going to be making a pleated mask. You will need for this mask 2 pieces of fabric, 6 inches by 10 inches, or I've made a smaller one here for somebody with a smaller face or a child, which is 9 inches by 6.5 inches as well. You'll also need 2 pieces of elastic. I've cut them at 11 inches. You can have smaller pieces if they're just going around the ear, but the way I've done them is I'm going to show you the easiest way to do them is to put them across, and then people can cut and tie depending on their size, or they can wrap them around the back of their head. If you don't have elastic and can't get hold of elastic, you'll need some bias binding, and you can make that out of the fabric that you have. I've cut up scraps and I've got 2 inches by 20 inches here, but I'm going to join them together because I didn't have quite enough material, so I want to make them 25 inches, so 2 inches by 25 inches is what you need. You'll also need a piece of interfacing to go on one side of your fabric, and to cut your pieces out you either need a rotary cutter or a pair of cloth scissors. Please don't use your cloth scissors on paper. Some pins or some clips to hold things together. So I'm going to go on over and put some interfacing onto the back of my mask to start with. If you put your pretty side of the fabric down on the ironing board and then have your shiny piece of the interfacing, which is the gluey side, and place that on top of the back of your fabric. So I put my iron setting on too, and that usually is a nice heat. Right, so I'm not going to use steam, I'm just going to use a dry iron. Press it on and it should stick really nicely. Now if you haven't got interfacing at home, what I've been using when I didn't have the interfacing was 3 layers of cotton instead of the 2, so I just cut another piece of fabric. So I'm going to do both my masks. So this was the smaller one, and for one I'm going to use the elastic and the other one I'm going to use the ties. I'm just going to use a ruler and a rotary cutter and just trim the edges of my mask. For the fabric you can use scraps or pillowcases, bed sheets, anything that you don't need to use or you're getting rid of. Cotton I found is the best fabric to work with. I'm trying to make the face coverings or masks, whatever you want to call them, as accessible as possible. You know, try and make as many as possible, maybe for your friends, your neighbours, family members, so you know everybody can try and stay as safe as and well as possible, really. So there you go. I'm going to leave about a 3-inch gap in the middle, and I'm going to start on this side, so about 3 inches away from the end, just here. I'm going to start here, and I'm going to sew all the way around my mask and finish here, leaving a gap of about 2 to 3 inches, and that's to turn your mask the right side around. When I'm doing that, I'm also going to attach the elastic while I'm going around, and I'll show you that as I sew. Just back stitch when you begin, just to make sure you've locked the stitches there. Then leave your needle in. Now if you're doing this on a domestic machine, you'll need to lift your foot up and leave your needle in and turn. On this machine I can lift the foot up and just turn it around. And keep your needle in, because then you won't skip any stitches. Now when you do this bit, I prefer to do it as soon as I've turned the needle. I like to put the elastic in about 1 centimetre down, and I just let the elastic show on the side so you know you've caught it. I've had many masks where I haven't actually caught the elastic and had to redo them. So just show the elastic a little bit on the outside so you know that you've definitely caught it into your machine, and then just sew along. Now you can reverse stitch a few times and go over it. Now when you're getting to the bottom, so sew straight down, when you get to stop about 1 inch from the bottom. And then get your second piece of elastic and same thing, place it in there, making sure you can see a little bit so you know you've definitely caught that elastic. Keep your needle in, turn. Now at this point make sure you move your elastic out of the way so it doesn't get caught in your stitching here. Now you're stitching a straight line all the way down. Once you've sewn around the edges, and make sure you leave your gap for turning it out, for bagging it out, you trim the corners as close to the stitching as possible without cutting the stitches. What you're doing here is just you're reducing the bulk in the corners. So as you can see, it's really, really easy to do. Now, at this point, and this is why you make sure you back stitch on those two ends, is that when you're turning it in, so you can pull it a little bit. So just bag it out. And then either using a blunt pencil or a closed pair of scissors, very, very carefully with scissors, just poke those corners out. And if you're doing this with children, maybe this bit you should do. So I'm going to press that and press the pleats. Okay. So give your mask a good press at this point. Now, a lot of people have been really struggling with the pleats. The easiest way I've found to do them is, this is going to be the bottom of your mask. Actually, it doesn't really matter, but it's either going to be the top or the bottom, but we're going to stitch that closed in a minute. So I'm just going to tuck that in. Just give that a good press. So the easiest way to do those pleats, people are really struggling with keeping them together. Fold over your mask by about 1 inch and press down. And then on this side, approximately 2 inches. So double that amount. And do the same. Just give it a good press. Fold it in half again. And make your crease. Now, when you open it up, you'll find you'll have natural pleats. So all you then need to do is just about 3/8 of an inch and pin it in place. Now if you use clips, you can use clips, but it will naturally sort of lean over and fold. And it's a much easier way to do it and quicker, especially if you're making lots of masks, than, you know, marking them, remembering to mark them when you cut it. And you've got them even on both sides. So I've pinned my pleats in place, and as you can see, they're more or less exactly the same width. And now I can sew them in place. So we've ironed the pleats in and pinned them in place. You can use clips if you want. Now I'm going to start. Remember where the bit where I left open to turn the mask inside out and to bag it. I'm going to start on the opposite side of that. And I'm going to edge stitch all the way round. stitch to begin with. Remember to leave your needle in, pivot. Now this bit, make sure you've got a good needle in for slightly thicker, because you're going to overlap over about 6 pieces of fabric. So, and I know many people have broken their needles by using a very thin needle. I've got a 14 in. And just carefully go over those bits. And as you go over, just remove your pins. You get to the pins, just remove, and your foot will hold your pleats in place while you're doing that. Let's go over to the end, lift your foot, pivot. Now at this point you'll need to move your elastic out of the way. And you're just edge stitching again all the way around, just making your mask that little bit stronger. Remember, you're going to be washing this regularly, so you need to keep it. And we're going to go back over those pleats, or the other side, and the pleats on the other side. Don't forget to remove your pins as you go along. If you've got clips, some people find clips easier. Now, if you were doing this by hand, you would do exactly the same method, you'd just hand stitch it, that's all. And you could get away with not doing the top stitching and just stitching the pleats down. So it's perfectly doable by hand, it'll just take you a little bit longer. As you can see, most of the stitching is straight stitching. And we're coming back round to where we started. And we'll finish there. Now, we've got your pleats secure. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to do one more line of stitching across about a foot's width all the way down. So we'll start, reverse, just to keep those pleats. And we're done. So you've got your bias tape, approximately, you can have it between 25 and 30, I've got mine at 30. You can cut it down if you want, depending on how much tie you need at the back. So fold it in half. I'm just going to mark that with a pin there. And you'll sort of need to average out the half of that, which is around there. Just so it's just a rough guide to where to place. Now, what we're going to do is I've folded the tape in half and ironed it flat, so it's easier to place on. About a 1/4 inch across. I'm just going to sew take your pins out as you go along again. That's fine. So do that on both sides. So we're doing exactly the same on the other side. Make sure you back stitch to keep that, and remove your pins as you go along. Now, if you were hand sewing this, you'd need to have a really good needle to get through those layers. To fold over and then over again onto your stitch line there. So just fold that in. You can put some pins in to help if you want to. I'm only putting a few just so that I can get it done. So just fold the ends in so you don't have any raw edges showing. Leave the needle in, lift the foot, turn, and we're now sewing along that long edge. Keep your two edges together. And this is where you're going to catch the material underneath. So you've got it folded, just hold it in place. Leave your needle in, pivot, and just to finish that last edge,